because U.S. felt it needs to pivot more to Asia to confront China. Would the U.S. goal succeed? Would U.S. be able to pivot to Asia to shift its resources to confront China in the Western Pacific? Because that's the end goal, right? That I think we can pretty much agree that's an end goal of the Trump's push for peace settlement in Ukraine, whether it's a more permanent peace or a temporary Minsk 3 level of ceasefire. Their goal is to focus more on China. Now, what's your take on that? Do you think Trump administration will succeed in their aim?
Oh, I mean, there's so many layers to that. Even if they can take absolutely all of their resources and pivot and completely face and confront China, are they going to succeed? They're talking about fighting a war, the largest population on one of the largest populations on Earth, with the largest industrial base on Earth, with one of the largest militaries on Earth, with nuclear weapons, with the largest ballistic missile arsenal in both variety and quantity on Earth. And they're trying to fight that war on the other side of the Pacific Ocean from where the US is actually located on a map. So just all of that already doesn't add up in America's favor. It is irrational. It's absurd, and it's the absurdity that we see from empire all throughout human history, and this is no exception. They don't really think that they're going to fight and win just an outright war with China. The goal actually is to trigger some sort of conflict, to create the same sort of international pressure on China that they created for Russia following both 2014 and then 2022. And the goal is, and they're already putting all the pieces into place to do this, to cut off Chinese maritime shipping. They're already waging war against the Belt and Road Initiative. People don't really pay attention to this. The U.S. has armed terrorists all around the world attacking the Belt and Road Initiative. In Pakistan, in Myanmar, they were killing people in Xinjiang inside China itself. The U.S. has forces on the island province of Taiwan, which is Chinese territory. Yes, Carl.
But Brian, this is okay. So there's some interesting development because you brought up Belt and Road Initiative and attacks on Chinese projects in Pakistan. Because recently there's an interesting development. There seems to be a soft rapprochement between Pakistan and United States in the aftermath of the Pakistan-Indian conflict. And one of the things recently what the U.S. did was actually place the Balochistan Liberation Army, the BLA, on its terrorist list. This is actually quite unprecedented. This is the first time they did that. And the BLA's main activities in the last few years have been attacking Chinese-led Belt and Road project in Pakistan. They've been killing Chinese engineers. How do you read into that? Like, I mean, isn't that a net positive for Pakistan and China that if U.S. placed BLA on the terrorist list?
I mean, Jabhat al-Nusra and ISIS were the literal U.S. armed, trained, openly backed terrorists in Syria, listed as terrorists, all while they were fighting from 2011 onward. And all the groups that they sprouted out of were all listed terrorist organizations before 2011. And they were only just removed once the U.S. successfully used them to achieve all of their objectives in Syria, because now they want to fund them more openly, back them more openly. So whether these groups are on a list or not does not inhibit the United States from supporting them. In fact, all it does is create an extra degree of plausible deniability that the U.S. can use and say, we put them on the terrorist list, and you think we're the ones arming and backing them? We're arming and backing terrorists? Us, the United States? That's preposterous. We would never do anything like that ever. So to me, things like that, this is all theater. And this is what the U.S. excels at. Narrative control, perception management, their ability to reach into a country and coerce them politically, economically, okay, also militarily. But I would say their greatest superpower has been and still is their ability to politically interfere in and control targeted countries. People look at Pakistan or India as monolithic states. They don't understand that there are competing interests on both sides of the border. just like there are here in Thailand and in neighboring Cambodia. People were trying to make it black and white, like Thailand's a U.S. ally, Cambodia is a Chinese ally. No, it's completely untrue. The U.S. was on both sides of the border. They got two groups of people who have always worked together, and they conspired to create this conflict to disrupt and destabilize Southeast Asia, to create the same dynamics along China's periphery that the U.S. has created along Russia's periphery, or has created inside nations like Pakistan and India, and between nations like Pakistan and India. So it's a complex game, and unfortunately, even at the highest levels of geopolitics, U.S. political interference is rarely talked about, and it's even more rare to see any sort of concerted efforts to confront it and stop it. So we see all this economic cooperation, even military cooperation, but in terms of political interference, this is just something that is so poorly understood, so infrequently talked about, and I believe that this is the multipolar world's biggest weakness. This is America's biggest opportunity.
I do want to ask about the aftermath of the Cambodia-Thailand conflict, because I understand there's a ceasefire, and Donald Trump claims credit for it because he really wants that Nobel Peace Prize. How is the U.S. role in quote unquote mediate that conflict is being received in Thailand?
Well, again, because the United States reaches into a country, controls information space so effectively, you have groups of Thai people who subscribe to alternative, Thai alternative media, Thai language alternative media, where they expose all of this and they understand it and they're extremely upset about it. But then you have what you could call the mainstream Thai media, which is heavily influenced by Western narratives. Essentially, they just take Western narratives and translate it into Thai and then repeat it to the Thai public. And these people buy that narrative. And so it's really hard to say which way the public is going. They're going in all different directions. There's no narrative cohesion. There's no single page everybody is on like you would see probably in Russia and China, because they can control their information space and they can have a unity of purpose across their population. The US has disrupted that here in Southeast Asia because none of these nations are strong enough or even apparently interested in having that sort of social cohesion within their country, even though that's an essential ingredient for collective progress. So President Trump wants to take credit for this, even though everyone involved in precipitating the conflict were backed by the United States and were essentially using this as an opportunity to disrupt the rise of Asia in general and put additional pressure on China specifically. And if you examine the narrative from the United States, they were very specific in pointing out, even though this is China's backyard, we're the ones that fixed this problem that we created, but we fixed it. And they're doing the exact same thing with this border conflict that they have done in the South China Sea. They created it in the first place. Yes, there is a historical and legitimate base that all of this is built on, but these are minor disputes that would not erupt into conflict unless someone from the outside came in and exerted additional pressure. So they did that in the South China Sea, and you see how they've inserted themselves and used that as justification for a military buildup in the Philippines and also on the island province of Taiwan. And now they're doing the exact same thing with this border dispute between Thailand and Cambodia, and they're trying to do it on both sides of the border. They've used other issues in Southeast Asia, like the Mekong River and resource management. They've used that as an attempt to recreate the success they've had in the South China Sea, to replicate that deeper inside the heart of Asia, Southeast Asia. And so this is the game that they're playing. That's what all of this is a manifestation of.
So you talk about this tyranny of distances for U.S. to cross the entire Pacific to fight China. But I think U.S. understand that problem. This is why they're trying to construct alliances to contain China, right? That's why they're trying to loop in Japan, South Korea, Philippines, Australia, and this is why we have our FBI director, Kash Patel, went to New Zealand to set up an FBI office. You would ask, what the hell is the FBI office doing in New Zealand when he should be giving us Epstein files? But I think that's my take on that was they're probably just the FBI office was set up to help to crush any kind of dissent in New Zealand who are possibly against a confrontation with China, because New Zealand is often seen as like the weakest link in the Anglo Five Eye countries, and this is exactly what they did in Australia and Canada. They will, through their intelligence agencies, they will release some report about Chinese interference in our election, in our political process, and then next thing you know, they try to purge all the people questioning why are we fighting. Okay, U.S. has carried out very successful strategy of neutralizing dissent in its vassal states like Australia and Canada that have possibly been advocating for closer tie with China instead of confronting it. Now, U.S. has bases all along the Western Pacific Rim facing China, from Japan running all the way down to the Philippines and Australia. Like, that has been the U.S. strategy, right? I mean, to possibly confront China. But the question is, I also agree with you. By the way, I don't think U.S. at this point is ready to throw caution in the wind to start a catastrophic World War III against China. But then why are they pivoting? Why are they gaining? Why are they putting all their military hardware? They just put Typhoon missiles on Philippines recently. Why are they right now building up military bases and laying out the framework then for a confrontation? What do they hope to achieve by this?
Well, it's interesting that the U.S. openly, publicly sets up FBI offices in foreign countries while accusing China of making secret police stations. There's no evidence at all when you look into it. They're like helping people renew their driver's licenses back in China. But anyway, that absolute hypocrisy and propaganda aside, you mentioned the tyranny of distance. This is what all of the think tanks where U.S. foreign policy actually forms and emanates from. They've talked about that, and they're trying to reduce it by not just placing huge amounts of military equipment and ammunition and everything in the Asia-Pacific region, but also compelling these nations to, first of all, give up their cooperation and trade with China, which is essential for their economic growth and prosperity and stability and everything that ordinary people actually need to live their lives. Give that up and transform their economy basically into munitions, arms and munition factories, so that the U.S. doesn't need to make it in the U.S. and ship it across the Pacific. Japan is making Patriots. Australia is making missiles, and they have it right there in theater, and they can just send it to wherever they're fighting, however they're fighting China. The way, there's many ways this conflict can manifest. People in their head, they have this kind of like movie mentality where it's going to just be this all-out war, but it's going to be very similar to how the U.S. is fighting Russia right now. Not just one, but multiple proxy wars, destabilizations. In many ways, this has already begun. The U.S. is waging a war on China's border in Myanmar right now. There's those militants the U.S. backs, and there's videos of white guys running around in the jungle in Myanmar with these militants the U.S. is backing with M16s. Where did they get them? Did they pick them off a banana tree, or is somebody bringing them in? How are they bringing them in? There's a humongous U.S. consulate in Chiang Mai, northern Thailand. There's no number of U.S. tourists in Chiang Mai or anywhere in Thailand altogether that justifies a consulate that big. That is because Thailand denied the United States a military base. They simply created one under the guise of a diplomatic facility. And these white guys, called the Free Burma Army, they go from Myanmar into Thailand. They report directly to the consulate in Chiang Mai. And we know this because WikiLeaks released all of these U.S. diplomatic cables, and that's what they're talking about. This guy from Free Burma Rangers reported to us about this, that, and the other thing. We told them, if you get caught, we can't say that you're working for us, et cetera, et cetera. So that is already going on right on China's border. We talked about Pakistan. We talked about in the past, and I've heard you mention this more recently regarding the Thai-Cambodia situation. Thaksin Shinawatra, this billionaire in Thailand, backed by the U.S. over 2 decades. A new billionaire, Thanaton Juagrung, the junior partner of Thaksin, also backed by the United States, he openly blocked the Thai-Chinese high-speed rail line. He openly said in public, we're too close to China. We need to pivot back to the United States, Europe, and Japan. Never explained what these other countries have to offer that is equal or better to what China is offering. He just said we need to pivot back, which is, again, the default position of all US proxies. And what we're talking about, and we're going back to the topic of US political interference, China offers a demonstrably superior deal that is best for everyone in the region, for the best interests of absolutely everyone in the region. But because the US is able to reach into a country, short circuit a nation's best interest by putting these client regimes into place that answer to Washington at the expense of their own country, they can disrupt this entire process. So yes, they're building up their military, but they're also creating a region that is dysfunctional, divided, even at conflict with itself, rather than a region China can unite and work together with and rise collectively up. And I just want to, I talk about Secretary Hegseth's speech in February to the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, but in Shangri-La, Singapore, the Shangri-La conference in Singapore more recently, he said the United States has been distracted in Europe and in the Middle East for decades, and we're fighting all these pointless wars over there, but now we're going to focus our attention on Asia. To do what? To wage pointless wars here, and we're already seeing that manifest itself.
Unfortunately, I have to agree with you on that. I think U.S. do have a strength in fomenting divisions and waging proxy wars. And my take on Myanmar is that for decades, U.S. has tried to turn Myanmar away, peel Myanmar away from Chinese sphere of influence. They did that with Aung San Suu Kyi. But what happened with Aung San Suu Kyi's final installment in power was that Aung San Suu Kyi traveled to Beijing to meet with Xi Jinping because Myanmar is China's neighbor. And during that time, the trade, after the sanction was lifted on Myanmar, the trade across Myanmar and China border actually increased. So with the whole civil war going, United States, it seems like U.S. just decided to play the role of spoiler, right? Like, okay, if the best I can do is destabilize a country, make it dysfunctional, so China can't do anything in that country, and I think that's what they did. Not that I'm a fan of the Myanmar military junta government, but I think the internal divisions play to advantage of United States that just want to destabilize the whole neighborhood of China, which they have done very successfully. And then Philippines, now we have all these like almost monthly bumper car situation in South China Sea. You have Filipino supply ships accompanied by both boats and plane full of like CNN journalists, and to get into a situation of a confrontation so they can get some footages to splash across international media to show, oh, this is terrible Chinese aggression, we have to do something about it, which just further justify increased military presence, U.S. military presence in the Philippines. That's how they got the largest U.S. Philippine joint military drill underway, and that first brought the Typhoon missile to the Philippines last year, of course aiming at China. But even if U.S. are able to destabilize the neighborhood, which is bad for China, because one thing China really hate is instability in its neighborhood, because that's bad for business. But China itself remains kind of immovable, and so how is U.S. gonna they can destabilize the neighborhood how they want, infiltrate, subvert, but at the end of the day, what purpose does that serve? Like, even the whole kind of cat and mouse game in the South China Sea with the Philippines. Sure, U.S. will continually uh, put more weapons, more on access to more Filipino bases. But then, as long as there's no direct conflict between China and United States, what's those military bases gonna do? What's those Typhoon missiles gonna do?
Well, it's kind of like what the U.S. had been doing in Europe for decades and decades. This constant build out of its military presence, the political capture of European nations, both Western and Eastern European nations, then the militarization of them, and then the selecting and then creating battering rams out of these countries and using them to fight a highly costly conflict. They have plausible deniability. Georgia attacked you in South Ossetia. We didn't. I mean, yes, they're literally wearing like U.S. uniforms with Georgian flags on them and waving around F-16s. And we trained them for years from 2003 when we overthrew their government to 2008 when they attacked you. But that's Georgia doing that, not us. So don't take it up with us. Go fight a costly war with Georgia. Luckily for Russia, that was very short. Then they did the same thing with Ukraine. And we can see what a nightmare that has been, what a huge drain on Russia that has been. And people can say all they want about how Russia is stronger now than ever, but it has drained their resources and has forced them to make difficult decisions. They lost Syria because they were so tied up in Ukraine. That is a fact, whether people want to admit it or not. And they're doing the exact same thing to China here in the Asia Pacific region. And I don't know what China's plan is, because when you look at China, if you've been to China, I have, people who have been to China, they see with their eyes. It's something you cannot even describe until you see it with your own eyes, how immense, how off the scale everything is that's going on there. And when President Xi Jinping says this is an ocean, not a pond, you can't disrupt it by throwing a rock into it. That's what he means. But on the other hand, is that China's strategy is to just continue cultivating power internally, working with others when it can, accepting that it can't when it cannot, and just weathering and waiting out the United States? Or is it just because they are completely incapable of confronting the US in terms of information warfare and helping partners defend their information space in the same way they sell weapons to these nations to defend their physical domains of national security? I don't know the answer to that. I would think that why not do both? Like, why couldn't you help a country like Thailand find people in Thailand willing to work with you in building up alternatives to Silicon Valley-based social media platforms who use algorithms specifically to compromise the peace, stability, and best interest of that country? And they, not just Thailand, but all of Southeast Asia, almost all of these nations depend entirely on US social media platforms to shape their information space. And in the 21st century, information space is as important as your airspace, your shores, your land borders. And if you're not defending your information space, it's like you left your airspace open, or you have no one on your borders protecting it. I mean, that really is the consequence of not defending it properly. And there's a long and ever-growing list of countries where they failed to protect their information space. The U.S. infiltrated it, divided that country, and completely destroyed it. The Arab Spring is a entire region of the planet the U.S. burned to the ground through this process, and still to this day, it doesn't really seem to be a priority among BRICS or the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. They talk about traditional domains of national security, but this seems to be not just an important one, but the most important one, because ultimately, what is human civilization? It's not cities, countries, and borders. It's a collection of human minds, and whoever controls those minds controls everything else.
Well, I agree, but I think we also have to acknowledge, U.S. still have tremendous amount of soft power. I mean, this is why everybody uses U.S. platform, right? Facebook, WhatsApp, and they also had the first mover advantage, right? Because the product's already out there. I think it will take time. And another thing is, it needs to come from the drive toward national sovereignty, over internet space, information space, that need to come from those countries themselves. Like countries like Iran, Russia, they were kind of forced into it. They were forced into it by the Western pressures to develop their own online platform. And China is very similar. And but China, Russia, they were able to do that. One, they also have large population. They have, they have the momentum. They have the capability. For other smaller countries, of course, they just go with whatever is the most dominant platform, which happen to be American. I think you'll have to the drive to for like informational space sovereignty will have to come from those countries. I don't think people felt. I mean, I'm sure people are aware U.S. leverage this platform for infiltration, for subversion, but I think in many of these countries, there's also there hasn't been as much urgency for building internet sovereignty, as it was for places like China or Russia. So we'll have to wait and see, I think. But in the meantime, China is developing its own capabilities around the area it cares about deeply, which is Western Pacific, its own neighborhood. You're seeing China is continually roll out more ships for their navy. They're building more missiles. They also, according to Pentagon, they're also upgrading their nuclear arsenal. So I think the chief aim of China is to achieve local superiority over United States. They don't have to compete with US on a global net level, because China's aim is not to be a global hegemon, and China's goal is to secure its own neighborhood. So that, I mean, it has been a long-term goal for China to push out the U.S. influence from the East Asia. But I think that's going to be a long game, because United States is not going away anytime soon. As much as we would like, Brian, but there's no escape for now. But I think Donald Trump is doing a fantastic job of accelerating the U.S. decline. So I'm all happy about that. He's my president for accelerationism. Any last word before we wrap it up, Brian?
Well, I think you bring up probably the most important point. I think a lot of people miss this, and I think it's because of, and I understand why they do this, but it is wishful thinking. When you start to study what the U.S. is doing around the world, it's horrifying when you see what they are doing to real human beings. If you live in a country targeted by U.S. interference and you see people getting hurt or dying, or you see streets that you've walked along with your friends and family burned to the ground, you understand how bad it is, and you have a deep desire to see it end. But as you pointed out, the United States is a massive superpower. It is dug in worldwide, and it is going to take a lot of time, energy, patience, and sacrifice to reverse that. And so a lot of people wanted to believe President Trump was fighting the deep state. No matter how obvious it is, he is completely facilitating the deep state. And I remember this so vividly when he was picking his cabinet, and he said Marco Rubio. People didn't even believe it. But now, because they have to rationalize what they wish was happening with what is actually happening, like maybe Marco Rubio isn't so bad after all. I mean, like, I was reading the comments under the Fox News interview where he's basically reiterating the whole mindset that started the war in Ukraine in the first place. And in the comments, he speaks so well, he's so articulate, he's such a great speaker. It's like you're admitting that he's manipulating you, and you're not even thinking about what he's saying. He's literally telling you the war that we said is Biden's war, it is a proxy war, we're just going to continue, but by dumping it on Europe. That's what he was saying on Fox, and people are like, they don't get it. So anyway, my final thought here is, I mean, but that's human nature. And human nature, like anything else in nature, a force of nature, can be harnessed and used for your own ends. Like a river, you can dam a river and you can use it to generate energy, and you could take advantage of people's human nature, and you can manipulate them. You can have their whole nation walk off a cliff into oblivion, like they're doing to Ukraine. Till people wake up to that reality, and understand that, again, the battlefield is inside your own mind, not necessarily in Ukraine or Syria. I mean, it is also, but fundamentally, it is all taking place inside our minds, and that's where we have to also, not only, but also fight the battle, and it's going to be a long battle. Multipolarism is not a done deal. If you look back at the Cold War, there was a lot of hope that the US empire would collapse and global socialism, or whatever they were calling it at the time, collective internationalism, would prevail, and it didn't. And here we are again. We have to be very careful to make sure that this time it does, by not fooling ourselves that it's a done deal and becoming complacent.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know why people think Trump is gonna fight the globalist elite. I mean, the guy is literally part of the
A
elite.
billionaire. Yes.
Yeah, and look at his Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, was literally the
Soros.
right hand man of George Soros. You think he's fighting the globalist elite? Anyway, so yeah, this I understand why people have that hope, because they do hope
Yes.
US end the endless war and the endless intervention that does not benefit average people of the United States. But you know, you just got to be a little bit skeptical.
Yes.
And because these elite, they're just manipulating you for their own ends. You know, it's they're it's not Biden, Clinton, Trump. That they're all they're the different side of the same coin, right? I mean, they might have their own squabbles among themselves, but they belong the same elite class. You know, they all
Yes.
party together, by the way.
Yes, there's photos of Trump side by side with Hillary Clinton, smiling ear to ear, both of them. And then the whole Epstein thing. I mean, everybody was real big on that when Biden was president, and now they're not so keen on it. It's you know, and like that's they take advantage of the left right partisan induced delusion that emerges in someone's mind. They pick someone, they're invested in them. They see only bad on the other side. They see only good in their side, and that is exactly, it's a strategy of tension. Empire has used it forever, and they're still using it today.
Yeah, like you said, it's human nature, right? Because we like to see things like black and white in binary, but a lot of times there's a lot of gray, and especially in United States, there's a lot of gray. And so thank you, Brian, again for coming to my show to talk about this. I mean, I'm there's so much things to talk about, you know. And you are the for people who are just introduced to Brian, he's a great follow for everything global geopolitics, particularly on the Ukraine front. I mean, his channel is amazing. Where can people find you, Brian?
Just search the new Atlas on YouTube, and then in the video description of every video are all the other places you can find and follow my work. I'm also on Telegram, Rumble, and X. And if BRICS ever gets their act together and makes their own social media platform, I will be on there in a heartbeat. I want to thank you also, Carl. You do excellent work. I was so glad that I was not the only person talking about Thailand and Cambodia. There was actually someone else in the English language out there getting it right and not falling into the pitfall. So I greatly appreciate that. And again, thank you for having me on.
I actually learn a lot from you, Brian. I mean, I think you are the one who actually lived there. You're the one who actually speaks the language, know the locals. Yeah, and follow Brian also for what's going on in Thailand. I mean, he's your real authentic expert. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Until next time, bye bye. That was great, perfect. That was like